Colin's approach to this was to just take off the clean out in the vent system, the plumbing system, and just take some hits off of that to get fresh air.
Yeah.
Fresh.
Yeah. Well,
in air quotes.
As long as it's vented waste pipe, I'm good with it.
Yeah. We don't recommend that, though. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Fine Home Building Podcast. It's our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. You can find us at FHBpodcast@taunton.com is where you can email us. FineHomebuilding.com/podcast is our website address. I am Justin Fink. I will be your host. Today I'm joined by the inimitable Matt Milham. Say hello, Matt.
Hello.
And we also have our video director, Mr. Colin Russell, with us today.
Hello.
Colin is brand new to the podcast, but we thought we would throw him to the wolves a little bit, right, Jeff?
Sure.
Yeah.
Not new to the brand.
Yeah, not new to the brand. Colin is definitely. How many years have you been here now?
I'm not sure if I'm finishing 6 or 7.
Yeah.
6 or 7 years.
It's Colin and I have done a lot of videos together, and most of the videos that you see coming out from our brand are under Colin's tutelage, basically. But he's not too likely to step out from behind the camera and get in front of it. So we're gonna.
Yeah, just getting me in front of the microphone is a big deal, actually.
So this is gonna be great. But no, Colin is he knows his building just like the rest of us. So we'll chit chat a bit. Anybody working on anything?
Not really working on anything. I took out a lot of poison ivy last weekend, and took out a few trees.
Jeff, can we get a close up on
Yeah.
Matt's
wanna
face?
Get this whole side, pretty much.
Yeah.
Also, all of my extremities.
How are you feeling?
It doesn't feel too bad.
Yeah.
I got cortisone and everything right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You look like a red Michelin man.
Yeah.
You're awfully red.
Yeah.
You look sweaty and shiny. Is
Yeah.
that the cortisone
I think
cream?
that's a mixture of the cortisone and the stuff just kind of possibly oozing.
Well,
I
that's
think we're
disgusting.
steam cleaning
That's
this room
gross.
after.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna walk out and just throw a match in here.
Yeah, we're just gonna burn this table.
Yeah.
Plus Milham.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. So I have to update you guys. I know I was talking on the show. I have kind of like a mea culpa here. Two things. One, I've said on the show many times that I'm a big fan of the idea of using I-joists for roof framing because the top flange of the I-joist for a roof rafter would easily accommodate a piece of sheathing or rigid foam installed from the underside, and it would basically create like a built-in vent channel. Yeah. And to me, I'm recommending this to all these people, saying we should do this. Never have I ever done this, by the way, but I wanted to. So when it comes time to finally be roof framing my detached garage this fall and winter, I designed it for I-joist roof and sent it to the lumber yard to get a quote. And as part of them giving you a quote, prior to giving you a quote, they send it to whoever their engineered lumber partner is at the lumber yard. That partner designs the whole thing. This is for anybody who has not worked with engineered lumber. This is the process. They design it for you and they spec all the parts and pieces you need, including hardware, and then they send it back to the lumber yard. Lumber yard adds it all up and says this is what your materials list will include. So for my 2-car garage, it came out to about $3,000 for just the rafters and hardware and ridge beam. That's the other thing about using I-joist for a roof is you can't. Well, yes, I won't say you can't. It's pretty. It would take some creative engineering to figure out how to use rafters without a load-bearing roof beam. Ridge beam rather. Right. Whereas most roofs, to clarify the difference, a ridge beam is structural. A ridge board, which can be as thin as 3/4 of an inch, is really just bearing the weight of the tops of the two rafters pushing against the center, right? And that's pretty conventional for most roofs. If you're going to do like a cathedral ceiling where you want it to be clear all the way up to the peak, then you often would switch to a structural ridge, which allows you to eliminate all of those structural, the collar ties and the rafter ties and all of that stuff that you would have blocking your view. I didn't want to, I didn't want a structural ridge, but for I-joists you need to have them because they don't act the same way that solid lumber acts, right? So anyway, so I priced all this out, $3,000 for a 2-car garage. And so I was like, well, this is curious. Let me just do some back of the napkin to see what 2x8s or 2x10s would cost, and that added up to about $700 in materials versus $3,000. By the way, none of this includes roof sheathing, insulation, drywall, all the other things that you have to have, roofing itself. So I think, long story short, I'm probably going to use 2x.
Yeah.
So this is a formal apology for all the people that I suggested and bullied into using I-joist rafters. If you all did it, I hope you had deeper pockets than I do. So that's what I'm dealing with right now. I'm trying to finalize those plans and get them off to the local inspector. And as sort of part of this, Colin, can we tease this already? It's not formally in production, but I think we can tease it.
Yeah, tease it.
So we're going to use part of this build as the pilot episode for a new video program. I will not tell you the name of this video program yet, because we're several months out from releasing it, but it's going to be for anybody who wants a very deep dive into a particular topic. So the depth of information we give you in an article, this is now what you'll be getting in a video. And the one that we're hoping to lead off with is working with engineered lumber. And so it will be kind of a full chapter of sorts on that subject. So you will get everything from material options to fastening details to how to cut it, how to lift it, how to work with it, what its pros and cons are, what its strengths and weaknesses, accessories that you have to know about, engineering details, how it all works, all of that stuff. And that we're hoping to work on.
And that will be the floor system?
I think we're going to launch with the floor system, beams, joists, sheathing, all of that. But that's always subject to change, and
yes, it is.
That is only number one in the list of the many concepts that we were hoping to release after that one. So I'm pretty excited about that. That's kind of the hot thing on our desks right now. So I'm excited about it. I'm hoping to be able to share more of it or more about it as we get closer. But yeah. That's my unofficial teaser for right now.
Woohoo! It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, it's going to be really cool. It's going to be good to get back out there and out from behind the desk a bit. So, Colin, what are you working on?
You mean?
I think out of all of us, Colin might be the one who does the most work on his house.
Yeah, I think so.
It's like he comes in and spent all weekend. I spent like 16 hours working on this thing. You're like, God, man.
Yeah. Instead of showing baby pictures, he's showing pictures of his house.
Yeah.
Well, my baby grew up.
Yeah.
Well, I'm remodeling my 1,300 square foot beach cottage.
Yeah.
Which was actually probably a 1-season home, and now it's a 4-season home. So what I'm working on now is remodeling the living room, which turned into putting rigid foam on the interior walls and then re-sheetrocking it, putting extension jambs on the windows, and changing the trim profiles to, fit my wife's style.
So wait, did you do the rigid foam? I didn't even know about the rigid foam. Did you do the rigid foam because you couldn't get enough R value in the walls? Or what's the story there?
Well, as a beach cottage, as soon as you open up, you can't imagine what's in the walls. Oftentimes they're framing with what was around, like, you might find a couple regular studs, and then you'll find some like B-board used as studs nailed together.
You don't even have a foundation, do you?
No, it says it's on piers, but I think if you dug down, you'd find that it's just sitting on the ground.
Okay.
Pretty sure about that. But I'm sure. What was the question? Like,
why rigid foam?
Yeah. Well, the walls were really uneven. I had a lot of choices to make. The ceiling's uneven. The floor's uneven. It's over 100 years old. It's moved. And I was going to square everything up. And my wife was like, let's keep the charm in this one room. Let's not change it too much. Let's just make it clean. Let's get rid of the trim that's been added. And actually, the trim was adding to seeing what was wrong. You know, like there was a trim, it wasn't crown molding, but along the ceiling plane. And that just took your eye like on a sweep. As soon as I took all that out, I took all the trim out of the room, and the only trim are the window jambs. I put, 5/4 extension jambs on them. But anyway, through this process, I found that there was really bad, a very poor insulation job done on the house. It was collapsed in a lot of places or just missing. So the best I could do was air seal it and get, I believe, R6 out of putting 2.5 inches up.
And what'd you put up? The blue stuff? Green?
Actually, well, I got what was at the store when I went that day.
Yeah.
So it was the silver board.
It's often the way it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are so right about the trim work kind of. A lot of people ask for trim work, and then it ends up making the situation look worse.
Yeah.
And you have to take a lot of care, especially if it's a thin molding like that you're bending to follow a screwed up ceiling. You're better off in that kind of a situation getting like a nice wide crown molding or a 2-piece crown molding or something that you can have the lowermost piece or the bulk of the single piece be dead straight along the bottom edge. And then kind of hide the irregularities in the ceiling up where you won't notice it. So your eye has something that's straight.
Yeah.
People that's the thing about like crown molding tutorials and that kind of thing. It's like, even if you just do a video or an article about installing crown molding, that's complicated enough. Then you apply that to the real world, and it's like, it can spin off into so many different directions of things to have to work on. I've done plaster wall houses where when you go into the inside corners, it actually like dove in. Mm-hmm. So the corner was, if you ran a square corner with the crown, you actually had a gap behind it.
Right.
And as soon as I ran into that, I'm like, well, where has this article been? Like, why? How come nobody's told me this was a thing? And this was years ago when
That's
I first.
That's what the caulking gun is for, Justin.
But it's hugely noticeable. I mean, it's a big gap.
Yeah.
And
well, scribing and cutting looks better than filling, right?
Yeah, but the problem is when it dips away from you, you need to scribe a lot of stuff for just that 12 inches that dips.
Sure.
Or you need to somehow pack it out back there, or you could float it, with compound or something. It's probably what Matt would do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably what I'd do.
Yeah. Well, I'm a hack. What can I tell you? Speaking of insulation, let's do some questions here. Question 1 is about the DIY spray foam kits. A slight revisiting of this topic because we covered it once before a while back. And just as a refresher, Patrick and I worked together on an article years ago where we tested all of these kind of portable spray foam kits, the ones that give you, 2 tanks. It's an A and B component. They look like little, they look actually almost exactly like a propane tank for a grill. And it's 2 parts. You hook the hose up to it. It comes with a disposable gun, and you spray it and you throw it away. The knock against them is that they're super expensive for the luxury. The environmental penalty is questionable because they're not always easy to dispose of the right way. Because you bring it to the dump and they're like, well, what the hell is this? I've never heard of these things. Even though the manufacturer will say, yeah, just bring it, just recycle it.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyway, so Chris writes to us, hey, fellas, I remember from a previous episode you mentioned that the little spray foam insulation kit you can buy from the store may not be a great option for the money. But the convenience of that option is hard to pass up on certain situations for those little jobs where you don't want to call in a spray foam pro. For instance, I'm currently running vent baffles up a partial roof and ceiling on the 2nd floor of our house, doing the cut and cobble with foam insulation and fiberglass bats. Cut and cobble is kind of our informal term for cutting up rigid foam and fitting it between each framing member and then sealing it in place. Chris says, I don't mind the tedious cutting, fitting, and air sealing to get everything right, but on a retrofit like this where nothing is consistent, there's a lot of little cuts and lots of trips up into the attic and back down into the room. Things seem to take forever. Until I think I could have cut so much time out of the project with that little spray kit and would have gotten more R's out of the assembly as well. But it's done now, so it is what it is. But basically my question is, are there better options to those kits? Do some brands seem to be more user-friendly or just work better for the guy who needs to tackle the small job? Or am I just stubborn and should have called in the pro despite the size of the job? Yeah, so I mean, this is the junction between ass pain and cost.
Oh my goodness, I've been in this situation several times.
Yeah.
I've never personally opted for the home kit though.
Well, give me a what's you got some printouts here.
Yeah,
what's like the general cost of these? I forget what they are.
Well, what's funny is the range of costs here. There's one kit here, but it goes by volume, which is a 115-pound kit is $1,500, whereas they have these little like 3-packs where I'm assuming the canisters are more like what you use the handheld versions, but it's still 2 parts. So these little 3-packs for $130. You get 3. I don't know how many.
They don't tell you the size of those?
Yeah, like board feet usually. I think some of those are.
Those are cool. I've never even seen that.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. I got to look this up.
So, yeah.
Keep going. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I didn't have much to add on it, but I mean, so I think there are options. Like for me though, it's going to be like there's a learning curve with everything. Like the first time I get this thing, am I going to be able to spray it accurately? And I would expect like any professional job to have to do it a few times to even be semi-proficient at it.
Right.
Oh,
I got it right here. I found it. It's called it's the brand name Touch and Seal, and it's called Foam Kit 15. So it has 15 board feet, and it costs $34 from the site that I'm looking at. So that we never had that as an option when we did this review. That might even be new since the last time we discussed this. So I've never seen this. That's a good find. 15 board feet.
Not a lot.
Not a lot. So our board foot is 12 inches by 12 inches and 1 inch thick.
Yep.
So if I had a 16-inch stud bay, 8 foot tall, and I wanted to do a flash coat of foam, I could do what, one-ish, one and a quarter or something like that. Yeah. That's
not a lot.
I kind of wish Chris had told us, the square footage of the area it was working in. I sort of have a picture in my head that it's where a gable end is maybe on a wall. So perhaps, but it's all guesswork. It'd be nice to do the math.
I mean, the thing that's cool about this is it probably, let's see here. First of all, it's closed cell foam, which is not always easiest to find. I don't believe. I'm trying to think of what those spray cans are that you get. Are those open or closed cell?
I think you can get both, but a lot
mostly closed.
Most are closed. Okay. I'm just looking at it real quick. Sorry for the hold up here. I'm trying to figure out if it has a gun that, because one of the things with the spray foam kits is you get a gun that shoots it at like a wide pattern. As opposed to the little straw.
I did actually look at a video of this being used, and it has what looks like a little crappy wand. I'm sure it's fine. It comes out, it looks like it's about a 5-inch spray. And the thing about it is if it's not in use after 30 seconds, you have to throw the nozzle out and replace it. So it probably comes with a bunch of replacement nozzles, but that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, well, that for sure. I hope it does. A lot of people also put like Vaseline all over stuff so that in between spraying it doesn't get stuck and all clogged up on the gun.
I like doing that.
But I have a feeling, and I have not talked to Matt about this, but I'm guessing that Mr. Matt Milham is going to talk to us about respirators.
Yeah, that's my issue with these things is that if you're doing this yourself, you probably don't really know what the dangers are, and the safety data sheets for these things are not really detailed in telling you exactly what you need to protect yourself. If I looked up one at like a big box store, I looked up the safety data sheet for that, and it gives warnings for like firefighters that if they go in, they have to wear a self-contained breathing apparatus and full protective gear.
Scuba tank.
Yeah, and that's more or less what a professional installer is going to wear when they're installing this stuff as well. They're going to have supplied air of some kind, either on their back, unlikely, or a supplied air respirator where the pump is outside and they're pumping the air into their mask.
Yeah, that's hugely different than a respirator with filters on it that everyone's buying and using for these.
And that's what I think.
If they're using anything.
Yeah, that's what guys are using. And the isocyanates, which is like the side A in a lot of these kits, are very bad for you. And you can become sensitized to them very easily. And if you become sensitized, then any exposure to any kind of like polyurethane in the future could cause like a like a reaction where basically you just can't breathe and you could die. So
So kind of a big deal.
it's kind of a big deal. Yeah. So, I mean, the amount of money that you'd have to spend to get a proper respirator to work with this stuff to ensure that you don't hurt yourself doing it. I mean, just call in the pros. Be safe.
Yeah, I mean, you can buy
Yeah.
the apparatus you're talking about for breathing. Mm-hmm. But for the person who's buying this, they're never going to buy that because
Right. They're like, they're not going to spend as much money on the protective equipment as they are on the spray foam.
And that's not something that you can rent.
You might be able to rent some, go down to your scuba shop.
Well,
rent some scuba
I just
gear.
meant, even at Home Depot, if you went there to buy these things in the rent-a-center, they don't have the.
I don't know. Yeah.
I remember one of the ones you had in the office was like a scuba situation, but not for diving.
Right.
It had a hose that went outside.
Yeah, and it hooks up to that little, basically pump that just
air
pumps
pump.
air from a clean spot to you.
Yeah.
CPAP.
And that's kind of what you want.
Daytime
You want
Can you use a CPAP
positive
for this?
pressure-
I think
positive
if you have a
pressure.
CPAP machine, you're probably safe.
Yeah.
And just go buy all the foam and install
Yeah.
it that you want.
I just hold my breath.
Yeah, I was going to say, just practice.
Yeah. I mean, you only got 15 board feet. You're going to be done in about 30 seconds anyway.
Run outside.
What's interesting is one time, I believe I was with you, Justin, where the first time I videotaped somebody spraying foam, I was only in
Yeah.
the room for about 2 minutes. I didn't even get close. When I went outside, there was a thin film on the lens that I could not get off. Right, Jeff?
Yeah.
Did Jeff ever get it off?
I believe we had a UV filter on there, so it didn't matter. But,
Yeah.
I mean, that's getting on your eyes.
Yeah, it was not. I mean, I didn't know any better when we did this article. Patrick and I were in an attic, down near the eaves. I remember spraying it up under the roof rafters, and the worst part about it was how hot it got because of the chemical cure of this thing gives off heat. And we were like, you get in these cramped spaces, and you're like, I can't be in here. It's too hot. And that, by the way, is also the worry when they're applying this stuff, where they tell installers you can only go in these certain thickness lifts or layers. And that's because it builds up so much heat when it's curing that if you put it on too thick, it could, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it really could spontaneously combust, but it might ignite some materials or lead to problems with curing or whatever else. But we were wearing respirators that had, for inorganic vapors.
Right.
But, we figured that was it.
Yeah. And those organic cartridges that you use for the isocyanates, they get depleted really quickly with that particular thing. So, like, you'll probably be able to start to smell it in a few minutes. And as soon as you start to smell it, that's the actual thing coming through the cartridge
Right.
into your lungs.
Right. How often are you supposed to change those? Oh, no, this is that question. I remember going back to the article. Now it's hard to answer,
It's
right?
really hard to answer because you don't know. You have to know what the concentrations are. And in order to know that, you have to have somebody who knows what they're doing come in and test the concentrations while you're actually doing it.
Yeah. I wonder if you could just had we worked so hard in that article to get somebody to say to us, hey, in average conditions, the average person will need to change it this often. And nobody across any company would give us anything like that. It was like everybody toes that line of, we can't tell you, you have to measure it.
Right. They want an occupational health specialist basically to come in, monitor your situation, recommend a respirator for a particular job. And the default is, if you have any questions and you don't know what to do, just go with the highest level, either supplied air or, basically scuba gear or, supply your air from outside through a hose.
Supplied air would be, how much did those cost?
A lot.
Like thousands, right?
Yeah, some of the units, with the little pump and the mask and the hose and all that stuff. Yeah, probably about $1,000, I want to say.
And you have to have you can't just run a tube outside because you need actual air pressure. Because
you
that's
want
what's
positive pressure.
Right, the positive pressure is what's keeping the stuff from seeping into the mask, right?
Mm-hmm. But they also have on-demand types, I think, too, at least with SCBA, where it's not a constant pressure inside the mask. Like you're breathing in essentially is what activates the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think Colin's approach to this was just take off the clean out in the vent system, the plumbing system, and just take some hits off of that to get fresh air.
Yeah.
Fresh.
Yeah, well,
in air quotes.
As long as it's vented waste pipe, I'm good with it.
Yeah. We don't recommend that though. All right. Did we actually answer Chris's question, or did we completely get off track?
Well, he said, is he stubborn, or should he have called, a pro? I'd say he's stubborn.
I say call the pro, but there
I think it's both, right?
Yeah.
I actually like the cobble method. He probably did the right thing. If he was concerned about time, make it up by hiring a pro. But Matt, you brought up some good points there about safety.
Yeah. There are supposedly some non-isocyanate foams being developed or possibly available on the market already.
So is this also an issue when I'm just using the can spray foam, the single part foam?
Yeah, it's a problem with
because I never really
a lot
noticed
of
much
polyurethane
odor off of that.
things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of PL.
Yeah.
We talk about it in every episode here. Not a sponsor, but that the only real concern there is touching your skin. Which so another editor, Andy Engel, who used to be here, did a full article on. I think it was called "Caulk This Way," and it talked about all sorts of caulks and sealants and adhesives. And his takeaway after all of his research and interviews was, I'm never using anything polyurethane again.
Yeah,
that was his reaction to it. Was the stuff what this stuff will do to you? I'm never buying a product that has it again. Yeah,
because you're even supposed to have good ventilation when you're using those things.
Yeah.
So I mean that's coming out of a tube. It's not a gas. That's coming out of these canisters for the spray foam.
Right. I don't know.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is going to be the thing that years later we all go, man. And the times when you're using it is when you're in a tight space that you're trying to solve a problem. That's a tight little corner or something. I wonder if this is going to be the one that we all look back on, and this is like the asbestos of our generation. Yeah. Let's all take a moment of silence for that. Anyway, matching existing shingles. This question is from Harry, which comes via our number one podcast fan. I will not give her name, but she knows who she is. This is a relative of hers. Hi, guys. I had a roof leak over the eaves of my house in Jupiter, Florida. I could tell because of a visible sag in the roof deck. I tore into it this weekend. I was irritated to find 2 layers of shingles complicating my repair. I took the day off work Monday to sister on new rafter tails and replace the sheathing and dry it all in with 30-pound felt. Hurricane season is ramping up. Yeah, don't we know it? The big problem is that the top layer of shingles are a discontinued brand with an 8 1/4 inch exposure instead of the 5 5/8 exposure of the 3-tab shingles underneath. The rest of the roof looks good, and it's not nearly time to replace it. This, by the way, is like the worst situation.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, but do I have any choice but to start getting quotes for a whole strip and re-roof job? If I just did this one section of the hip roof with a similar color architectural shingle, how would I tie it in at the hip rafters with the ridge cap shingles on a different spacing? It's the side of the house by the garage door, so you can see it from the driveway. I've got to sell this house eventually, so my long-term solution needs to look decent. What do you think? We have some photos of this, right, Jeff? You can go to findhomebuilding.com/podcast. Let's talk about a couple of different things here. One, he said he was irritated to find 2 layers of shingles. There's nothing wrong with 2 layers of shingles. I mean, it's not like pure best practice. Like the diehard roofers will tell you tear it down to the
sheathing,
or to to the weather barrier and re-roof it. But yeah, to the sheathing. But code will allow you to have 2 layers without a problem.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming these are 2 layers below the top layer. So he has 3 layers of shingle. Is that how you're reading it?
I'm reading it as he had 2 layers total. But if what you're saying is that he has 3 total, then yes, that is something to be irritated about. You can't have 3. But it's not clear from the way it's written. What was your take, Matt?
Yeah, I thought it was.
Wait, can you see in the photo?
2 layers. I think it's 2.
Yeah, because he said 3 tabs underneath. I think it's just 2.
Yeah.
He essentially has a hole in the roof.
Yeah. The first thing my eye went to is that vent pipe boot flashing, which does not lap onto the shingle.
Yeah.
I think that I don't know if it laps to the shingles underneath. It's hard to tell.
And it is directly.
So you're thinking you found the source of the leak.
And it's directly over where all the rot is.
Yeah, what do you call that? About 4 feet upslope of where this giant hole in the roof has rotted?
Yeah.
The water's running down that rafter, you're thinking?
I think it's just going right down underneath that flashing right into the roof.
You know what's happened there, too, is they probably had that thing flashed right, and then they put on the second layer roof and just
let it
said,
go.
well, it's already flashed down here, so we'll just
Right.
screw the flashing on the topmost layer.
And then just dumped all that water in that little
Yeah.
sandwich between.
Found some kind of a hole down there. Yeah, Harry's in Florida, he said, so we're not worried about ice dams. So it's not that. But anyway, we're not here to fix his roof
but
problem.
if he's going to repair this part of the roof, if the leak is up there, it needs to be addressed, which means opening the roof more.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that would have been the way to go here is to have taken out these shingles surgically so
Yes.
that you didn't have to replace them with new shingles. You would replace the old shingles in over the new sheathing. Sometimes that's like hindsight is 20/20 because if you don't know what you're going to find,
It's also hard because it's so easy to split a shingle.
Yeah, they can
it
get
is
really
very
brittle,
difficult. It's easier said than done for sure.
especially in that sun.
Yeah, that's very true. You can't really wait for a cool day to do it, right?
Do you guys know, are there other 8 1/4 exposure shingles on the market?
I think these are pretty specific.
They're architectural.
Yeah,
but
you're right. I guess what I was picturing when I read it was those kind of the ones with that look like slate with the clipped edges.
yeah.
But these look like just giant architectural shingles.
Yeah.
8 1/4 inch exposure.
I mean, it seems to me the two options are find a similar shingle, right, and patch it in and live with the difference of look, or strip that side of the house. But
Yeah, but he's saying even if he strips that side of the house,
How is he
It's
gonna-
not
it's
gonna
gonna
match
it's
at
not
the-
gonna match at the hips. We're just gonna be really. I mean, like
True.
on a gable roof, you can get away with a lot because you can go up the gable, and then by the time you
Right.
get to the other side of the house, you've already forgotten what color the front is.
Yeah, you
and
can't see.
Yeah, I mean, like a black and a gray kind of go, or like a gray and a slightly different gray
Sure.
can go together. A hip roof is like you got nowhere to hide, bud, because you're seeing several roof planes all in one shot. Yeah, I think you got to replace it. You got to do a tear off. That's it. That's not cool. I mean, a hole in your roof sounds like an insurance claim, though. So
Yeah.
might be able to.
Figure out who it was who installed those. Who installed that boom.
I meant
especially-
homeowners insurance.
Oh, that too.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, you're not gonna get money from the contractor.
Probably not. But that's negligence.
How would you even go about? I mean, so you'd have to. Certainly, he's discovered there's a hole here. So then, I guess the next steps would be keep on peeling back until you find where the rot stops. Then you have to cut out all of the rotten stuff, stabilize any wood that has damage from the water, address any insulation that's gotten wet and all that stuff. And then you have to put in fresh sheathing that lands on framing, refasten it, patch in the weather resist, patch in the roof membrane, and then put down the new shingles. Of course, if you're going to strip the whole roof off, then it's going to be pretty easy to expose all the damage. Just careful stepping.
certainly.
Yeah.
And I believe that there are the typical solution for a roof vent boot would work here, right? I mean, with that existing the existing vent pipe, you could just take off the old boot and
Yeah.
slide a new one right down over the pipe and flash it correctly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there you go. I don't know, man. This would be, I don't know where Jupiter, Florida is. I wonder if it would be hot. Is all of Florida subject to high wind roofing?
I don't know.
I would imagine.
I think it probably is, but I don't know
Yeah.
that for sure. So just be aware of that. If you're in a high wind area, the nailing pattern for the shingles is going to be a little different. And then probably there's some other kind of best practice details.
Yeah.
Matt's working on an article on that right now, but
Yeah.
probably won't get it done in time for Harry. So I'll have to look elsewhere.
Just look. Usually they have the high wind pattern for the nailing, I think, right on the shingles. So,
But-
I mean, just look at the package.
But when you were working with Mike Girton on that story, I believe he had some other kind of just kind of precautionary best practices too,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, and some of it may not apply on a hip roof like this, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if you've got a gable roof, you want to make sure that those edges are stuck down
On the gable end?
Yeah, on the gable end.
Yeah.
So, and there's some other stuff too, but
Yeah. It's basically belt and suspenders stuff.
yep.
Oh, I got another water damage question. Who chose these questions? So Hunter writes to us, since my wife and I just bought our first home in Annandale, Virginia, which is a suburb of DC, in April, I've been listening to all the available podcasts from the beginning. For the record, some of your podcasts got me through the hurried process of repainting an entire first floor before our second child arrived. Others had me scratching my head and wondering what language was being spoken. But I've determined that I'm informed enough to be dangerous, and yet not still know anything really at all. All right. So we have succeeded, Jeff. More to the point, our dishwasher has sprung a leak. I noticed something wrong one day when I went into the kitchen and half tripped on a cupped floorboard. The drywall in the finished basement below was more than just damp. It was moist and almost to the point of being soggy. I stopped the leak, and I'm fixing the dishwasher, but I'm now left with a 2-foot by 3-foot approximate area of floorboards in front of my kitchen sink that are still cupped. Do I have to remove all of the flooring, or all of the flooring and the subfloor? How will I know what to replace and what is salvageable? Is it possible for me to run a dehumidifier below the affected boards and run fans over them to get them to return to their original placement? And once again, we have some photos. These are excellent photos. Hunter, thank you. We have it's like a slow zoom in of the problem. And we get right down there. You get the floor level and you see how much they cup. Brutal. So it's pre-finished. It looks like oak, strip flooring, maybe 2 1/4, tongue and groove stuff. Thoughts?
Definitely.
Yeah. Well,
This is why hardwood in the kitchen is sometimes not favored.
Or a
Yeah.
drain under the dishwasher.
Yeah. Nobody does that.
It's crazy.
But we do it in...
You have to do it in your washing machine.
Do you have to now?
If
If it's an upstairs, I think you do.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It's like just bend up a sheet metal pan and put it under there.
Yeah.
It's going to affect getting the dishwasher in and out probably, but
Even if you didn't have a pan, even just a drain in the floor, I mean,
path of least resistance.
Yeah.
give it a place to go.
Oh, man, I would want to take it up just to see what the condition of the subfloor is.
Oh, I guess I didn't really explain what we're looking at. Should I do that? I mean, we're looking at a bunch of floorboards and they're cupped,
Massively cupped.
They're massively
Yeah.
cupped so that their edges are turned upward. So they look like you're looking at the concave side of it. Mm-hmm. The reason why that happens is because when a board gets wet and one side is able to dry and the other can't, it will curl towards the side that's able to dry more easily. So if you wet a sheet of plywood, dropped it flat on your driveway, the side that faces the sun is going to get a lot of drying potential. So it's going to curl, it's going to dry before the side that's facing down against the driveway. So now you have one side dry, one side wet. The wet side stays flat. The dry side, the wood will shrink because wood shrinks when it dries, and it will pull those edges of the plywood together, so it makes a big kind of a U shape. That's what's going on when wood does that. So what we're seeing here is it can't dry below, but it can dry above, and so it's curling.
Yep.
All right, now you can go, Matt.
I just want to see the condition of the subfloor. I don't know what that's made out of, and
That was my question.
May have been going on for a long time. I don't know how this stuff's fastened down. Is it?
No, he said that it was just like a pump thing, or something that broke kind of like suddenly and catastrophically, I think. It wasn't like it happened while I was sleeping last night, but I think it was a shorter time span.
Well, he said he noticed it when he tripped over the floorboard.
Right.
So it's possible that was going on
Sure.
for quite a while, and then maybe there was a catastrophic leak near the end of something that had been going on for a long time. But I don't know how it's fastened down. If it's nailed the way those things are cupped, I don't know if it's going to go back.
There's no way
the
you're
right
getting this
way.
back down, no matter how how it's fastened. I don't think.
Yeah.
You're not. I mean, once the board's cupped, I mean, in my plywood example, sometimes you can flip the plywood over, re-wet it, and it'll kind of bend back to being flat again.
Yeah.
But plywood's a different animal. I mean, it's pretty relatively flimsy and flexible of a material, and is installed in ways that are.
And it's got the opposing grains pulling it,
Yeah, it's just different. I mean, you can
absolutely.
you can get it back into shape and fasten it. With these kind of boards, I mean, you're not going to flatten them out by nailing them.
Yeah, not really.
Well, we spoke to Jeff earlier, and he had a situation where his boards cupped, and when the room dried, they actually went back.
Was it pre-finished, Jeff, or was it?
No, No, it was just regular oak strip flooring. I mean, it didn't cup to this extent.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the
I'm
reason
surprised by that.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I was
so
saying
was
that
I.
is maybe
Very happily.
a multi-step approach here. Like, if that drywall below is punky and needs to be replaced anyway.
You mean subfloor?
Yeah,
Go from underneath.
From underneath.
Oh.
Yeah.
Open that up and see what's going on. You could try and dry everything. Maybe it'll come back a little bit enough to make you happy.
There are actually sort of like things they can do, for situations just like this when it gets wet. It's essentially like a vacuum type thing that they put over the floor, and they create negative pressure. It creates drying potential for the stuff underneath, and it will flatten it out a bit. I don't know if it'll handle something this extreme because
I mean, the tough part is let's say you had naturally finished oak strip flooring that like you laid unfinished and then you clear coated. You could potentially just sand this down and then try and blend in a clear coat
Sure.
to repatch it. That's harder to do when it's a stained finish, and it's really hard to do with pre-finished flooring, which is what this looks like based on the size of the crumb catchers between boards.
Yep.
Crumb catchers being the derogatory term for slight bevels where each board meets the next one.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is necessary because
Finish needs something to hold on to.
Well, yes, and because they want to have a little bit of wiggle room in height differences that they can hide behind.
because they're not sanding everything uniform. It needs
'Cause,
to.
I mean, even an unfinished floor, you put
True.
it together and it's always a little uneven,
yeah.
and then you sand it flat. So
I know what I would do in my house.
let's hear it.
I would,
Burn the house down.
well,
Ignore it.
absolutely burn the house down. But since it's
Didn't you do this in your house?
I recently toothed in a bunch, but this
Yeah.
is pre-finished, right? So if you can get more of the same, it's a perfect tooth-in situation.
Yes.
And this type of flooring, probably the longest board in there is 6 feet. I'd be surprised.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if you even got that.
Yeah, so I don't think tooth and in would be that bad here.
So
You'd also be able to address the subfloor if there is an issue at that point.
now, did you do when you toothed in your floor? Did you follow the approach that we saw when we did that video down in Florida?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
everything I do these days is what I learned on a video,
Okay.
or it's regret about what I did before I came to find home building.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. It's almost like ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, certainly.
I'm sure that people listening to the show feel like that too. Like, damn it. I mean, I feel like that in my own house, for God's sake. Anyway, so the toothing in method Colin's talking about is essentially you could basically just remove all of the boards that are a problem. And the way I would think about that is like try and draw a square that includes. I mean, you could take a Sharpie and just make an X on every board that's cupped.
Yes.
You're going to work your way back from the dishwasher until you find boards that are fine again. And the ones that are fine, that's going to be your kind of cut point.
Right, and in a floor like this, because the ends, because they're short, you're probably going to take out whatever board you put on an X. You're going to take that whole board out.
Right.
Yeah.
You're going to rip it down the middle.
As opposed to what we did when we were down in Florida doing that old house where we did this job, where he had some floorboards that went from one side of the room to the other
Right.
without any butt joints. So he had to just create butt joints where he was going to patch in, which he did by holding a square down on the floor and then using an oscillating multi-tool and
that's
just kind
what
of
I
made a
was
plunge
doing.
cut.
Yeah.
But yes, the other option here is when you want to remove a board, you make 2 parallel cuts with a circular saw set to the thickness of the flooring. And then you use a chisel to basically bust the pieces out.
Yeah, you just pry out the parts.
Yeah, then you got to use some pliers, pull out the nails, and then you have to kind of work your way back in. It's a
slow process.
Yeah, the part where you have to kind of you have to drop the board in and hammer it between 2 other boards, like slide it
Yeah.
between 2 other boards can be very hard.
Oh, yeah.
And it's going to be really hard to get that because
Well,
you'd have to do it pretty much from the dishwasher side
Right.
here. So
Right.
good luck.
They do make, and I don't know what to call this. I have one. I don't know what to call it. It's a flooring clamp. It's a ratcheting clamp. And what it's used for typically is when you get to the last couple of rows of flooring before you hit the wall, those are hard to pull tight to fasten because you don't have room to swing the hammer
Sure.
and knock them together. So this thing, you put it down and it pushes against the wall over a stud, and it has an L bracket that pulls the flooring. So as you ratchet it, it's pushing against the wall and pulling the flooring together.
Nice.
So you could possibly use something like that here to persuade those boards to slide even.
Yeah.
Or I guess any sort of clamp that you could flip around and use as a spreader rather than a clamp.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of the boards you're going to be, cutting the bottom of the, not the tongue. What would you call the receiving end?
The groove.
The groove.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll be cutting the bottom groove out and using construction adhesive.
Yeah.
Or,
The tough part with this, because it's pre-finished flooring, is that
the height.
I wasn't going to say that.
Sorry. I'll guess what
What
you're
is
going to
the
say
height?
next.
What are
I
you
just
gonna
meant we were talking about before about one of the reasons they put the bevels is for the height. So
Yeah.
if you're removing tongues or what have you and then putting construction adhesive, it might be hard to match.
Not only that, but if you don't want to do what we're saying, where you slide it in between boards, you're going to have to cut off the bottom of the groove, drop it in, like tip it into place, and then face nail it, which is going to look terrible on a pre-finished floor if you face nail it, because it just
Agreed.
shows up. Oak, you might be able to get away with it. The floors that tend to have kind of darker open grain, it's a little easier to sometimes hide small nails
Sure.
because they just kind of disappear. But if it was like a light colored maple floor, it's like you're only going to see those holes.
And you would never do like a single board that was just glued, not have a fastener.
Well, sure, you could possibly go that route. I mean, maybe get out your barbells and put
weight on it
put a
while
board in and put a weight on it while it cures up.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to. Those nails aren't doing anything to really hold it there, except they're just holding it down while the glue sets. So it's not like, well, I don't have nails, so this glue is going to fail. And it doesn't matter. So if you can weight it down, then yeah, I would do that. What was I going to say? Oh, if you go to replace the subfloor, same deal applies to what we just said with the roof. You got to go back to framing. You got to have solid bearing, and you got to make sure that subfloor is the same thickness as the existing subfloor.
Yep.
Because like you said, any little difference in height, and you're going to be
You're going to have a new problem.
Didn't we, when we did that project down Florida way,
Down Florida, Scott Seidler?
Scott Seidler, did he was shimming the subfloor from underneath between the joists, right? Like to just make up any little difference in height, he was sliding shims in between the bottom of the subfloor and the top of the joist, wasn't he? I feel like I remember that. I remember being down in that basement.
I think when he patched over where the heat grate was,
Yes.
he had to do that. Yes.
But this would be the same way.
Right. In the field, he didn't have to do that. It's just he went over an odd area.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. The part that you'd have to replace the subfloor. If you did that,
That's
you would
right.
have to it would be helpful to be able to,
Yep.
if you have 3/4 subfloor, maybe get, what is it, 23, 30 seconds? Is that the one that's slightly, I always forget. Is that what it is, Jeff?
Yeah.
You got to be you got to go to like the 128ths to buy plywood these days. One other thing to note there is Matt earlier mentioned the type of subfloor. If it's plywood subfloor and it wasn't a really long ongoing problem, you may be fine. It may just need to be sanded down a little bit to get it back in plane.
Or Advantech.
Yeah.
That stuff withstands a ton of wetting.
Yeah, I mean a lot of that stuff is rated what's called exposure 1, which means that it's designed to get wet while you're building a house. So getting wet from a dishwasher and then drying quickly probably won't be a problem. If it's an ongoing thing that was happening under your radar, it's probably going to have some more damage. And if it's OSB, commodity OSB that's not super treated for weather, that tends to swell and then not return to its original shape, as opposed to plywood, which can swell and mostly return to its original shape. I mean, you might have to do a little sanding still, but I probably, what always comes up in this problem, this kind of question is, would you replace the felt paper underneath the floor too? And to me, no way. Because when you're sliding all those pieces in, and if you're gluing stuff down, I don't want to glue to paper. I want to glue it to the floor. So
for the patch,
that will be the next thing that he thinks about when he does this.
Well, when I had to deal with a little bit of flooring, when I took that wall down between those two rooms, and I bought the rosin paper, and I started to put it down, and then when I was trying to drive those pieces in,
It just rips.
it just tears up. So I ended up just getting rid of all that.
Yeah. It's
Waste of money.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's everything we got for this week, right? See you guys all next week. for another fine episode of Fine Homebuilding Podcast. I guess there's a bunch of stuff we talked about that we're going to have links for today and some of these photos. So do make sure you hop on to finehomebuilding.com/podcast. And if you have questions, send them in with photos or send us a video at fhbpodcast@taunton.com. Until next time, this is Justin for Matt and Colin and our friend Jeff saying keep craft alive and happy building.